Chapter 6. In a pitch-black secret room, several people in black cloaks sat opposite each other. The atmosphere in this dark secret room was particularly oppressive. One of them suddenly asked in a deep voice that sounded a little old. "Third brother, why didn't you guard the sacred blood crystal properly? Why did you call us to the family's secret room in such a hurry? Don't tell me you can't hold back your temper again so soon? In the past, it would have been fine if you had only guarded for 4 to 5 years. But this time, you have just taken over with your second brother for less than a month. Do you want to quit so soon? What you're doing is a little too much. Do you want to be locked up?" The voice wasn't loud, but everyone could hear the anger in it. What was most surprising was that they couldn't tell where the voice came from. As soon as the words came out, a black-robed figure in the crowd whose face couldn't be seen stood up and took a step forward. The old face under the black robe was full of smiles as he looked at everyone in front of him. "Today, I don't want to be lazy and quit. It's just that I don't need to do it in the future." The old man's indifferent tone made everyone frown. They seemed to be a little unhappy. As soon as the words came out, everyone felt the temperature in the space around them rise. One of the black-robed figure's robes also fluttered. Seeing this situation, the old man also hurriedly stopped his joking face. His face under the black robe had a solemn expression. Everyone seemed to see this pitch-black space as bright as day. Seeing this, they didn't say anything else. The rising temperature in the secret room and the terrifying aura gradually calmed down. When everyone's mood became serious, the old voice that was full of laughter spoke again. This time, it didn't have the joking tone from before. Instead, it was very serious and careful. He looked at the tallest black-robed figure in the crowd. Because of the black robe, the person's eyes couldn't be seen. But for some reason, the two of them tacitly raised their heads and looked at each other. If there was no black robe, it would be a scene of 4 eyes meeting. After a few breaths of time, the old voice slowly said, "That's right. The Saint Blood Crystal lit up, and it's a god-level bloodline." It was a simple sentence, but it caused the atmosphere that had just become serious to become lively again. All the elders looked at each other with tears streaming down their faces. The Saint Blood Crystal was the harbinger of their family's prosperity. They had guarded the Saint Blood Crystal for many years in hopes that one day, the Saint Blood Crystal that represented the hope of their family would shine brightly. Because as long as the Saint Blood Crystal shone, it meant that a descendant of the family had just returned to this continent. Moreover, it would only be an outstanding junior with extremely dense bloodline power and outstanding talent. At that time, it would be the time when the clan would prosper. But now, their long guard had finally paid off. The Saint Blood Crystal had not failed to live up to their expectations. Boom! Suddenly, an extremely powerful soul storm wreaked havoc in the entire secret room, enveloping the entire secret room. It even added a few restrictions outside before gradually stopping. Ever since the soul storm appeared, all the elders in the secret room stood up and stopped talking. They quickly tidied up their robes and quietly stood in their seats, waiting. Suddenly, the elder who spoke first spoke again solemnly. "Third elder, you actually dared to joke in front of us about such a big matter and delayed the timing. How should you be punished?" The third elder's expression changed drastically. He understood that the first elder of the family was really angry now. Thus, he hurriedly replied, "I, Exio Mingyua, am guilty. Please punish me, first elder." Although Exio Mingyua was the third elder of the Exio clan, he was extremely playful and did not guard the Saint Blood Crystal properly. He would often sneak out of the family and cause a bunch of trouble. The higher-ups of the family did not know whether to laugh or cry. If not for the fact that he had only caused some small trouble and was the third elder of the family, he would have been locked up by the family long ago. The elders' council had tried to persuade him in every possible way, but he was still indifferent and did whatever he wanted to do. Until this year, it was the third elder's turn to guard the Saint Blood Crystal again. If not for the first elder coming out of seclusion in time and learning about the matters of the past few years, and using his tyrannical strength and family rules to suppress him, he would probably have run out again at this moment. But fortunately, he was very respectful to the first elder. In addition to the family rules, he did not dare to run out again. But now, it had only been a month since he took over from the second elder, and he actually called all the elders over again. This made the elders who knew his character rather unhappy. The first elder was also extremely unhappy. Finally, after making a fuss for half a day, Xiao Mingyue could only admit defeat and accept the first elder's punishment. Elder Xiao Mingyue knew about the big matter of the family, but delayed reporting it. Thus, he was punished by confinement for a month. But in view of Elder Xiao Minggue's merit in reporting the big matter of the family, the task of finding the whereabouts of that person and bringing him back to the family will be given to you. Elder Xiao Mingyue, do you have any objections? The first elder stared at Xiao Mingyue and asked in an unquestionable tone. Xiao Mingyue bowed slightly and replied to the first elder. Replying to the first elder, Xiao Mingyue has no objections. At this moment, he was extremely happy with the first elder's punishment in his heart. He could not even thank the first elder enough, so how could he have any objections? Although he was confined for a month, when he thought about how he would be able to leave the family after a month, this 1 month was nothing. Thus, he naturally accepted the punishment very directly. The first elder did this just to find a reason for him to leave the family. In any case, this way, not only could he get rid of Xiao Mingyue, this troublemaker, but he could also find the clansmen with the divine bloodline. Why not? The other elders were naturally very clear, but they could only curl their lips and nod in agreement. After all, the first elder had spoken, so who would dare to have any objections? After the matter was distributed and the elders packed up, the first elder released his aura and said in a deep voice, "Today's matter is not related to anyone. Apart from us and the family head, no one else is allowed to know about what happened today. If we find out that any outsiders know about it, kill them all." The first elder's words were full of overbearing meaning, but everyone also understood that this was all for the future of the family, so they all nodded and replied, "Yes." Seeing the reaction of the elders, the first elder also nodded, then his figure gradually dissipated in the dark secret room. The elders also retreated and left the secret room respectively. At this time, Xiao Yan, who was tens of thousands of miles away, was flying toward the towering mountain with Huo Yi. They would not have known if they did not walk. Once they did, they were shocked. It was unexpected that this seemingly short distance was actually quite time-consuming to travel with Xiao Yan's speed. This caused the two of them to feel helpless.
Chapter 7. At this moment, Xiao Yan and Huo Yi were flying toward the towering mountain peak. They would not have known if they did not walk, but once they did, they were shocked. They did not expect that the seemingly short distance was actually quite time-consuming even with Xiao Yan's speed. Until now, the two of them had been flying for a couple of hours. Even so, the two of them were still far away from the mountain peak. From this, it could be seen just how far Xiao Yan and Huo Yi were from the mountain peak. However, the two of them were not anxious. They had trained for so many years. If they could not even endure such a small distance, how could their cultivation have reached such a level? Moreover, traveling could be considered a different kind of training. Additionally, the two of them were very patient and did not deliberately increase their speed. Hence, they did not pay much attention to it. It was just that they could not help but feel a little surprised at how far the journey was. Moreover, the two of them had also properly appreciated the great scenery of this other world along the way. Along the way, they had also picked some elixirs that even Xiao Yan, an alchemist grandmaster, could not name. This caused Huo Yi to ruthlessly mock Xiao Yan, making the journey not so boring. Moreover, those mysterious elixirs had also caused Xiao Yan to become even more curious about this world. In his heart, he had also become increasingly certain of his guess. As for saying that Xiao Yan was a grandmaster alchemist and not an emperor alchemist, one could only blame Xiao Yan's bad luck. However, it could also be said that it was caused by Xiao Yan himself. In the past, the Dode who had appeared on the Doqi continent had comprehended the way of heaven and earth. After which, they would comprehend their own Emperor Tier Pill formula or find some Emperor Tier Pill formula left behind by some ancient Dode. However, Xiao Yan was really miserable because if he wanted to comprehend his own Emperor Tier Pill formula, he would need to unleash his strength as a Dode and merge himself with heaven and earth. However, if that was the case, Xiao Yan would definitely leave the Doqi continent after that. Xiao Yan would naturally not agree to that method. However, when Xiao Yan tried the second method, he ended up failing again and again. He could only helplessly give up on searching for the Emperor Tier Pill formula. As a result, Xiao Yan had always been a grandmaster alchemist. However, if Xiao Yan were to compete with other alchemist grandmasters in alchemy, there would definitely be no one on the Doqi continent who would be a match for Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan, who was flying forward in the air, suddenly stepped on empty air and stopped flying forward. His brows were tightly knit together. His face contained some seriousness and excitement. Huo Yi, who was following closely behind, also stopped when he saw that Xiao Yan had stopped. Huo Yi looked at Xiao Yan's somewhat serious expression and raised his eyebrows slightly. This was the first time that he had seen Xiao Yan reveal such a serious expression ever since Xiao Yan had become Didi. However, the excitement on Xiao Yan's face was also seen by Huo Yi. Hence, Huo Yi vaguely had an answer in his heart after pondering for a moment. Although he was currently a 9-star Do Shen, he was unable to sense it because he was too far away. Hence, he did not dare to be too certain in his heart. After all, an elite Do Di was not a cabbage that could be found on the street. How could it be so easy to meet one? Hence, Huo Yi still asked curiously, "What is it? Could it be that something has happened to that thing?" Xiao Yan shook his head. He looked at the mountain peak that was still on the horizon and said, "It is not that something has happened to that thing. Instead, there are two extremely powerful auras there. Moreover, the owners of those auras are at least at the same level as me. It seems that the thing there has also been discovered by the strong people on this continent." There was a reason why Xiao Yan was so certain about this continent and did not have the slightest doubt about this world. This was because when Xiao Yan had just woken up, his heart already had a feeling that was different from when he was on the Doqi continent. This had nothing to do with the de-essence that densely covered the sky. Instead, it was because of the space of this continent. Xiao Yan's first feeling in this world was that he had become weaker. However, this was not because his strength had become weaker. Instead, it was because Xiao Yan discovered that his strength had been greatly suppressed. Hence, he was unable to unleash his full strength. This was also the reason why Xiao Yan and Huo Yi were unable to reach that mountain after flying for such a long time. Huo Yi, who was following closely behind Xiao Yan, immediately had a change in expression when he heard these words. At the very least, they were at the same level as Xiao Yan. Did this not mean that the two of them were at least elite Do Di? Huo Yi could only quietly agree with his own guess in his heart when he thought until this point. His expression immediately became solemn. His heart was thinking about how he could obtain that mysterious thing from the hands of the two elite Do Di. On the other hand, both of Xiao Yan's eyes by the side emitted waves of fiery hot glow. This was because Xiao Yan had already discovered that although his strength had been greatly suppressed, the Do Qi within his body had also become increasingly solid. Additionally, he had repeatedly familiarized himself with the space of this world during these few hours. He was confident that he would be able to defeat Hun Tiandi within 100 exchanges if he were to fight with him again. Unfortunately, ever since Xiao Yan had become an Didi, the only opponent of the same level that he had met was Hun Tiandi, whose soul had already been destroyed. This thought was naturally impossible to complete. Now, however, his strength had become even more solid. Moreover, there were two elite Do Di that he could practice with. Why would he not do so? Xiao Yan's feet stepped on the empty air when he thought until this point. His body suddenly charged towards the red and white mountain peak. Huo Yi behind Xiao Yan glanced at Xiao Yan, who had charged out. He could only shake his head and stop thinking about it. His body flashed and hurriedly followed. He could tell from the expression on Xiao Yan's face that although Xiao Yan was still a little hesitant earlier, the fiery hot fighting intent within his heart had once again been stirred after he thought of the solidification and suppression of his strength. A big battle was unavoidable. A couple of hours later, the two of them stopped when they were still 10,000 feet away from the two elite Do Di. They hid within the floating clouds and quietly observed the distance. With the eyesight of the two of them, they were naturally able to clearly see everything within a 500-kilometer radius around them. The distinct red and white mountain peak reached into the clouds and covered half of the sky, causing everything that entered one's eyes to be dark. Adding the shine of the sun, it appeared completely dark. However, who were Xiao Yan and Huo Yi? How could this little darkness block their sight? Looking from afar, there were two figures standing in the air halfway up the mountain. The two of them were 100 feet apart, each occupying a piece of the world. One of them was an old man with white hair and a thin and amiable face. His hands were behind his back and he was standing at a spot where the sun was shining. He gave off a celestial feeling. The other person was wearing a black cloak and black gas lingered around his body. It covered half of his body, making it impossible for others to see his body clearly. However, one could tell that he was not a kind person from the pitch black mask on his face with an unknown magical beast pattern on it. However, Xiao Yan and Huo Yi did not have the mood to bother about this at this moment. Instead, their eyes widened and their pupils abruptly shrank. Their faces were filled with shock as they looked at the black-robed human figure in the dark black fog. The two of them spat out two words in unison. Chapter 8. Xiao Yan and Huo Yi were stunned. They looked at the human figure within the black chi. They were so shocked that they were unable to speak for a long while. A moment later, Xiao Yan finally frowned as he stared at that person. His eyes revealed a doubtful expression. From the appearance of that person and the black chi that surrounded him, one could tell that that person was most likely a member of the Han clan. However, Xiao Yan did not expect to meet a member of the Han clan the moment he arrived in an unknown world. This had indeed surprised him. At the same time, it also caused Xiao Yan's heart to unknowingly become as careful as when he was training outside in the past. This was not merely because of the human figure in the black fog below him. Instead, it was because he was cautious of the path ahead of him. The Han clan was definitely not a benevolent clan. After so many years, Xiao Yan already hated the Han clan to the core. Hence, whenever Xiao Yan met a member of the Han clan, he would definitely kill them. This was not because Xiao Yan was cruel. Instead, it was because of his many years of experience in dealing with the Han clan, as well as the persistence in his heart. It is really a case of enemies meeting on a narrow road. I have just exterminated the Han clan. Now that I have arrived in another world, there is another Han clan the moment I come out. I, Xiao Yan, really have quite a deep affinity with all of you. Xiao Yan spoke with a cold smile. Huo Yi by the side also laughed coldly as he looked at the human figure in the black chi. Soon after, the two of them ceased speaking. Instead, they hid their bodies and quietly looked at the two people in the distance. Old Flame Demon, back then, we had agreed that no one is allowed to touch the things inside for 10 years. This was something that you had suggested. Are you trying to violate the rules between us now? A moment later, the green-clothed old man finally opened his mouth and reprimanded angrily in front of Xiao Yan's eyes. 1,000 feet in front of him, the human figure that was shrouded in black aura did not move at all. Instead, the face under the mask carried some ridicule as he looked at the green-clothed old man. After which, he slowly opened his mouth and said, Yuan Qing, who told you that our ghost temple sect would follow the rules? When have you ever seen our ghost temple sect follow the rules? What's more, these rules are meant to be broken. I'm just reflecting them. I didn't expect you to not even know this concept. You're really stupid. Yuan Qing's face darkened when he heard that. He knew how shameless the Ghost Slaughter sect was. They had always been a group of people who would do anything for their own benefits and missions. There was even a time when they brutally slaughtered the entire population of a city in order to kill a severely injured person who had fled into a city. However, both sides had only sent one person for this mission, and both sides were of equal strength. Therefore, he believed that with his strength and the rules set by the old flame demon ghost, he would naturally not dare to easily violate them. However, he never would have thought that the old flame demon ghost would actually sneak over while he was unprepared, intending to take the mysterious treasure for himself. It should be known that he had never even investigated the treasure before he discovered it. Moreover, the old flame demon ghost had already investigated it before him. It was because he had arrived in time that the old flame demon ghost did not succeed. However, the old flame demon ghost had actually come to steal the treasure right before his eyes. This caused him to be both shocked and furious. Firstly, the old flame demon ghost had actually dared to openly ignore his strength, causing him to be extremely furious. Secondly, the old flame demon ghost had actually dared to come alone right before his eyes. This meant that the treasure was no small matter. Once the old flame demon ghost obtained the treasure, his strength would definitely soar and he would be able to suppress Yuan Qing. At that time, Yuan Qing would likely be no match for the old flame demon ghost. At that time, not only would Yuan Qing fail to complete his mission, he would even lose his life. That would truly be a loss. An incomparable fury immediately soared to the sky when Yuan Qing thought of this. Both of his eyes looked as though they were about to spit fire as he stared at the old flame demon ghost opposite him. Suddenly, the aura on Yuan Qing's body abruptly soared. It continued to soar as an extremely dense green-colored douqi shot to the clouds. It only stopped when it caused the surrounding space to emit waves of trembling sounds. The old flame demon ghost opposite Yuan Qing lifted the corner of his mouth into a cold smile. He let out a cold snort and a powerful aura shot to the sky. Gray-black douqi instantly covered the entire place, rising to the same level as Yuan Qing. They each occupied an area, contending with each other as they collided with each other. Xiao Yan in the distance suddenly waved his sleeve when he saw the scene and absorbed Huo Yi into his body. The douqi within Xiao Yan's body surged wildly. His entire body was covered by a layer of douqi light barrier. His aura was withdrawn. His face was solemn as he looked at the two elite Dou called Yuan Qing and the old flame demon ghost. The douqi within Xiao Yan's body continued to circulate as he prepared himself to face any sudden situation. Suddenly, Yuan Qing's body shot up. The seals in his hands continued to change. He flashed and shifted a couple of times in the air, leaving behind 3 after images. However, this was not the end. His body continued to flash and appear between the 3 after images. Xiao Yan could vaguely see that the seals in the hands of the 3 after images were changing repeatedly. The bodies of the 3 after images continued to solidify. This was actually a kind of transformation technique. Although the formation of this transformation was a little slow, once it was formed, it would be equivalent to having a large additional support. Once this technique was successfully used, its strength would definitely be incomparably great. The corner of the old flame demon ghost's mouth twitched under his mask when he saw this technique. His expression instantly became extremely ugly. He involuntarily cursed, 9 transformation body art. Yuan Qing, you old man who will not die. Looks like you really want to completely break off all ties with me. Humph. Old flame demon ghost, you can forget about saying anything else. You were the one who broke the rules first. You wanted to use that treasure to suppress the old me. Now, you are blaming the old me. Today, even if the old me has to risk being seriously injured, I will get rid of you, this scourge of the world. Yuan Qing's words grew more and more intense. In the end, there was even a hint of killing intent. However, the main reason for that was because he was greedy for the mysterious treasure. At any rate, a treasure that even an expert like the old Balrog wanted to obtain was definitely no ordinary item. At this moment, the old flame demon ghost was no longer in the mood to think about this. He was startled when he heard that. He stared at the 3 Yuan Qing's clones with a stern expression. He might not have believed it if it was someone else. After all, once someone reached their current level of strength, their physical strength would be extremely tough. It would be difficult to heavily injure them, let alone kill them. However, he had no choice but to consider it carefully since it was Yuan Qing who had said that. Chapter 9. Yuan Qing naturally had his own confidence since he dared to utter such words. This was something that the old flame demon ghost was clearly aware of. This was because he had clearly seen an expert whose strength was similar to his or even a little stronger than him being directly turned into dregs by this move that Yuan Qing was currently using. Not even a corpse was left behind. Although the price was that Yuan Qing was seriously injured, there were still a couple of experts around Yuan Qing at that time. Even though there were still quite a number of people on the side that had been killed, the others could only flee in all directions after the strongest person on their side was killed. Yuan Qing had also recovered to his original state a couple of months later and did not even leave behind any sequelae. This matter caused Yuan Qing to become extremely famous for a long period of time. Yuan Qing was also known as an expert who was unrivaled within the same class. Although everyone knew that the price Yuan Qing had to pay for using that move was extremely great and that it would be difficult for it to have much of an effect when facing many people at the same time, it still caused people to sigh endlessly. After all, if one could use a serious injury to exchange for one's life during a critical moment, it was definitely something that everyone was willing to do. This was because as long as one's life was still present, what did it matter even if one received a serious injury? The reason for all of this was now once again standing in front of the old flame demon ghost on top of the 3 avatars of Yuan Qing. The avatar technique that Yuan Qing practiced was called the 9 transformation body formula. It was a Tian class high-level Do skill. If a practitioner was able to practice it to the peak, it was rumored that one could even form an avatar with a strength similar to the original body. Moreover, that avatar could also use any Do skill that the original body knew. A practitioner would be able to form 9 avatars at the beginning. The avatars would possess half of the original body's strength. Once the practitioner reached the initial level, the 9 avatars would merge together and finally form 3 avatars that possess 2/3 of the original body's strength. Once the practitioner reached the advanced level, the 3 avatars would split from 3 into 9 before returning to 1. Finally, an avatar with a strength similar to the original body would be formed. As long as the original body was not destroyed, the avatar would not die. As long as the original body was not destroyed, the avatar would not die. This point was similar to the D class high-level Do skill, 3000 lightning illusionary body, that Xiao Yan had obtained back then. With Xiao Yan's eyesight, he had naturally already seen through the profoundness of the 3 avatars. When he thought of his own 3000 lightning illusionary body, his heart immediately became excited. If he was able to obtain this so-called 9 transformation body formula and add it to his own 3000 lightning illusionary body, he would definitely be able to improve and create an avatar Do skill that belonged to him. In that case, it was likely that even a Do Di was merely an ant-like existence in this world. He should also be able to possess some ability to protect himself. A glint appeared in Xiao Yan's eyes when he thought of this. Both of his eyes stared intently at Yuan Qing in the distance. This 9 transformation body formula was filled with many difficulties when forming each avatar. First, one had to use a crystal stone with the same attribute as the original body as the foundation of the avatar. On top of this foundation, one had to use one's spiritual strength to continuously agglomerate and refine the avatar, imprinting the chi method that the original body practiced into the body of the avatar. Next, one had to control the avatar to absorb the natural energy to solidify its body and continuously use the pure Do Chi of the original body to refine the avatar. This continued until the attribute crystal stone and the avatar merged and reached the stage of perfect fusion. Only then could the refinement be considered a success. Moreover, each time the avatar was about to fuse and upgrade, it would trigger lightning. The avatar needed to endure the destructive strength of the lightning and be continuously baptized by the lightning, causing the avatar's body to become even more solid. Only then could it be considered a complete fusion and upgrade. After each fusion and upgrade, the avatar would borrow the destructive strength of the lightning to form an extremely wild and violent energy within its body. If the original body were to ignite this energy when facing an enemy, the strength that the avatar would erupt with at that moment would be more than half of the original body's strength when it self-destruct. Although the strength of this move was not ordinary, the price was also extremely high. After using it, the original body would be in a seriously injured state and fall into a dangerous situation. If one was not careful enough, one could die at any time. However, all in all, this 9 transformation body formula could be considered an extremely good Do technique. It was just that whether or not the avatar could complete the fusion and upgrade would depend on the toughness of the original body's spiritual strength. After all, the avatar and the original body were originally one. The evolution of the avatar would naturally depend on the original body. If the avatar could endure it, it would transform into a dragon overnight and become a strong person. If the avatar could not endure it, the best case scenario would be that the avatar would be crippled and the soul would be seriously injured. In the worst case scenario, the soul would be completely destroyed and one would become a walking corpse that could be slaughtered by others. Although it could be said that this Do technique was extremely difficult to practice, as long as one could successfully practice it, its strength would be so great that it would cause one to feel shocked. This point could be seen just from how Yuan Qing's all-out attack had directly killed an expert of the same level. If it was an ordinary time, the old flame demon ghost would naturally not be afraid when Yuan Qing used this 9 transformation body formula. After all, there were usually a couple of attendants beside him. Yuan Qing would definitely have some misgivings in his heart. Currently, however, there was only the old flame demon ghost and Yuan Qing present. Of course, they were unaware of Xiao Yan's existence. Otherwise, Yuan Qing would definitely not use the stow technique that was basically gambling with his life on the spot. Due to the old flame demon ghost urgently wanting to obtain the natural treasure within the belly of the mountain, he was also afraid that Yuan Qing would discover and obstruct him. Therefore, he had only come alone this time around. He did not bring those few subordinates with weaker cultivations with him. However, from the looks of the current situation, it was likely that it would be difficult for him to return alive by himself. The pair of shady old eyes under the mask eagerly swept over the surrounding environment. When the old flame demon ghost's gaze swept over the enormous mountain beside him, both of his eyes suddenly brightened. A dark and vicious glow flashed across his eyes. Immediately, he turned his head and laughed as he looked at Yuan Qing and said, "KK, old ghost Yuan Qing, you are indeed able to kill me here if you use your full strength. However, don't you want to know just what is inside? You need not be concerned about this. As long as the old me kills you here, all the natural treasures within this mountain will naturally belong to me. At that time, the old me will naturally know just what the treasure is. As for now, I advise you to save your strength and prepare to receive this big gift that I am about to give you." Ha 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 ha. The corner of Yuan Qing's mouth was lifted as he coldly snorted. Immediately, he turned to the old flame demon ghost and spoke with a face filled with ridicule. "Humph, do you really think that you will be able to obtain the natural treasure within this enormous mountain as long as you kill the old me? KK, what a joke." The old flame demon ghost laughed coldly as he glanced at Yuan Qing. His tone was indifferent as he spoke. However, there seemed to be something that he did not say at the end of his words. Just as he was about to say it, it was forcefully swallowed back into his stomach, causing one to feel a confusing feeling. Yuan Qing hesitated for a moment after hearing these words. Finally, he frowned and opened his mouth to ask. Chapter 10. If I had come here today to obtain the item in the mountain alone, do you think I would have been discovered so easily with my strength? If I wholeheartedly wanted to avoid you, do you think that you would have the slightest chance of discovering me given the concealment methods of my ghost temple sect? The old flame demon ghost ignored Yuan Qing's doubts and asked again. Yuan Qing frowned deeply when he heard that. He lowered his head and pondered the Balrog ghost's words. The Balrog ghost was right. With his ghost temple sect's concealment methods, Yuan Qing might not have been able to discover him even if he cultivated for 100 years if he wanted to. However, what did he mean by that? Did he really purposely let me discover him so that he could lure me out and kill me in a single stroke? Thinking up to this point, Yuan Qing's entire body broke out in cold sweat. His soul power involuntarily spread out to investigate the surrounding auras. However, Yuan Qing was no fool. After a brief investigation, he retracted the powerful soul power he had spread out. He did not allow his thoughts to mess up his mind. He thought about it from another angle. Since the Balrog ghost did not bring any guards with him when he came out, and the Balrog ghost knew that it was impossible for him to kill Yuan Qing alone, it would already be quite good if Yuan Qing did not kill him instead. Then why exactly did this old flame demon ghost spend so much effort to lure him out? Xiao Yan, who was hidden in the white cloud in the sky, shook his head and softly sighed when he saw Yuan Qing's face as he thought bitterly. Everyone says that the older a person is, the wiser they become. Why does Yuan Qing seem so foolish now? Looks like the longer you live, the more reluctant you are to die. You've become afraid of death. You fell for such a simple trick. You've really wasted your life. A moment later, Yuan Qing raised his head and looked at the Balrog ghost. His eyes stared at him without blinking as he said in a deep voice, "Tell me, what do you want from me? Since you have lured me here, it is likely that it is not as simple as having a chat with me, right?" The Balrog ghost parted the corner of his mouth that was hidden under the mask. His entire body within the black fog quietly relaxed. Due to the cover of the black fog, Yuan Qing did not notice it. However, Xiao Yan, who was in the clouds, frowned slightly. Immediately, the corner of his mouth was lifted into an icy cold arc. The members of the Han clan were really unable to change their treacherous character no matter where they went. These fellows would first compete with the other party in terms of strength no matter where they went. When they were stronger than the other party, they would torture the other party even more viciously. If they were unable to defeat the other party, they would think of all sorts of methods and use everything around them to attract the other party's attention. On the other hand, they would wait for the right opportunity and viciously bite the other party like an incomparably poisonous snake. After which, they would quietly enjoy that painful feeling, causing them to be incomparably excited. The Balrog ghost looked at Yuan Qing, who was standing quietly without moving, and the three avatars behind him. He laughed, "Brother Qing Yuan, there is indeed a natural treasure within the belly of this enormous mountain. However, there is an extremely powerful restriction within this mountain. It is likely that this natural treasure has already been discovered by an almighty person. However, this item might not have matured back then. Hence, this restriction was left behind in order to come and collect it in the future. You should also understand the meaning behind my words now that I have spoken until this point, right?" The Balrog ghost's face was filled with smiles as he glanced at Yuan Qing. At this moment, even the way he addressed Yuan Qing had become cordial. Yuan Qing frowned upon hearing this. He looked at the Balrog ghost with some dissatisfaction and said, "You wish for me to join hands with you and break the protective restriction on this mountain? On what basis should we obtain the natural treasure within it?" The Balrog ghost seemed to have already anticipated that Yuan Qing would ask such a question. Hence, he merely glanced at Yuan Qing before quickly continuing, "After the old me has investigated the treasure within this mountain, if I have guessed correctly, this item should be." The words in the Balrog ghost's mouth suddenly paused when he spoke until this point. He raised his eyes to look at Yuan Qing, who was quietly standing in the air with an impatient face. The corner of his mouth under the mask was lifted. After which, he continued, "I see fire vermilion fruit." The entire place became quiet when these words were uttered. Yuan Qing's eyes were widened. His pair of turbid old eyes were filled with excitement and threads of greed that could not be hidden. His entire body involuntarily trembled slightly. The Doqi within his body also began to churn at this moment. If it was not because Yuan Qing saw that the Balrog ghost still had some value, it was likely that he would have been killed by the Balrog ghost with all his strength the moment those words left his mouth. The icy fire vermilion fruit was a kind of natural elixir that had extremely harsh growth conditions. Any place where the icy fire vermilion fruit grew would definitely be a place where the fire affinity and ice affinity energy of the world intersected. During its growth stage, the icy fire vermilion fruit needed to first absorb the ice affinity and fire affinity energy of the world to reach a balance point. After which, it would grow independently for 100 years. Once it reached 100 years, it needed to be picked immediately. Otherwise, one could only wait for it to grow to 1,000 years and wait for its next evolution to be picked. This fruit appeared just like a vermilion fruit from its outer appearance. Two tiny lines of fiery red and icy blue intertwined with each other, turning it into a dazzling and eye-catching piece of art where red and blue intersected. Ice and fire conflicted with each other. Originally, they should not have merged into one. However, it was unknown whether it was a strange creation of the heavens or the uniqueness of the fruit itself, but the two types of energy within it did not explode due to the conflicting attributes. Instead, they merged together in an extremely harmonious manner. It was precisely because of this point of the icy fire vermilion fruit that when a cultivator swallowed it into his body, the balance between ice and fire would be broken. From there, it would release an energy that was dozens of times greater than usual. The cultivator would then use this energy to break through. Wherever it grew, other than plants, all living beings within a radius of 1,000 miles would be intimidated by the strange pressure of heaven and earth that it emitted, not daring to lay a finger on it in the slightest. The situation now was exactly the same. Looks like it is undoubtedly the icy fire vermilion fruit. Yuan Qing calmed his mind. His eyes stared at the Balrog ghost for a long while before glancing at the huge mountain beside him that had a clear distinction between red and white. Finally, he nodded his head in confirmation. "Tell me, how do we split it?" Yuan Qing did not say much and directly asked the question that the two of them were most concerned about right now. The Balrog ghost was not surprised. He knew that Yuan Qing had been stuck at this cultivation level for many years. Now that he finally knew that the thing he had been dreaming of was right in front of him, he was naturally extremely anxious. "Haha, that's easy. Since the restriction was broken by the two of us together, the thing inside should naturally be split in half. Brother Yuan Xing, do you have any objections to this? Yuan Xing hesitated for a moment before the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. He agreed, all right, then we'll split it in half. With that, the two of them approached the huge mountain and prepared to break the restriction on the mountain.